So I can give you loads of examples, and I don't know where they are. I'm just going to see what comes next, because you're probably ready for a photo, are you, or two? I've been talking a lot. This is Daniel Lim, and you don't know him from a bar of soap. He didn't know me, but I was his best buddy for the day because I ran an event in San Diego, and I advertised it by saying I'd be giving a house away. In fact, for every attendant who came along, your card, and if you don't have a card, you write your name on a piece of paper, it goes in a big barrel, we spin it, someone from the audience pulls out a name, and that winner gets the house. Is that a hot deal? How much did you pay to come here tonight? Nothing? What was that? No, I didn't offer a house tonight. I'm saying in San Diego. But did you get something free tonight? Did that induce you partially to come along, maybe, a little bit? For some of you, okay. If there was an event on where someone, me or someone else, offered a house, which you might be inclined to attend, I booked the Marriott Hotel in San Diego, which had seating for 500, and we could expand it to 1,000. Guess how many turned up? 22 people. I'm serious. 22 people. Now, you don't expect me to give away a house if it's only 22 people, right? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. If I said I'd give the house away, I didn't have a minimum person requirement. I wish I did, but I didn't. There were 22 there. And some even said, well, you're not going to give it away, are you? I said, yeah, it's all to do with integrity. It's keeping your word. Really is. So we spun the barrel, and this guy won. He had tears streaming down his face. He said, I've never won anything in my life. Here's the funny thing. The following weekend, I was doing an event in Los Angeles teaching commercial real estate. And when I was introduced, the woman running was a Korean lady. She said, and Dolph's, you'll find him an amazing teacher, but he gave away a house last weekend in San Diego. And people stood up and accused her of not letting know. She said, why didn't we know about this? She said, folks, I sent you all the email. And they said, oh, is that what it's about? We didn't get it. We didn't read it. They didn't read it. They were probably watching TV. And here's the point, folks. Again, I applaud you for being here, because it's only by being Johnny on the spot or Jenny on the spot or whatever, and seeing the sense of this and starting to look, that you'll take action. That's why when someone asks you a question, do you agree with us or disagree? Have an opinion. Train your body to have opinions. You'll make mistakes, but making mistakes is good. School teaches us never to make mistakes. And generations gone by, they'd rap you over the knuckles if you got it wrong, and you're scolded, you dumb so-and-so. Where do they put, they even call them the dunce. Some of you are nodding a bit too familiar, with too much familiarity. Where do they put the dunce? In the corner, facing the wall, as if they'll catch up that way. I mean, it's all wrong. No, it's true. You know, you ask a group of 5-year-olds, who's got 5-year-olds at home? One of 2, 3. Who's had 5-year-olds at home? Okay, all right. Who's ever been a 5-year-old? Okay. When you ask a 5-year-old a question, like a class of them, and say, class, what color is this pen? Yes. But they're all shaking their hands, right? Saying, ask me, it's a competition. And you say, Sally, what color is it? And she says, it's a red pen. And you say, no, it's not. Does anyone know the answer? Not only is everyone else still shaking their hands, but even Sally's saying, ask me again, I know the real answer this time. True or not? And now let's fast forward 10 years. We've got a 15-year-old teenager. Comes home from school. Hey, did you have a good day at school? Yep. Bye. What's happened between the ages of 5 and 15 so that we go from ask me? Yeah. And a question some of you might do well to ask yourselves is, what's happened to the 5-year-old that used to be inside each and every one of you, such that you no longer have that enthusiasm? Because this is so hot, folks. You can do so much with this. It's phenomenal. So anyway, I'm trying to get to some of my examples of these commercial, loans. You know, banks lend money on property. They have big billboards. This is an electronic billboard in the States. I hope this is my pointer. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm in the middle there. It's electronic. So the numbers vary as the rates vary during the day. Isn't that astounding? And you drive to work and you see it's one number, you drive, oh, they've come down a bit, I must refinance that one or whatever. It's kind of cool. This is one in Australia. Some of you may remember it. I regret driving in the bus lane, officer, but I don't regret my home loan with $0 establishment fee. Zip zero zilch establishment fee. Remember that one? Here's one in New Zealand. Spend more money on your home and less on your home loan. So banks want to lend you money. They're in that game. Here's another one with an electronic billboard. I've only come across one outfit that ever said renting is better than buying. It was on a billboard. I slammed on the brakes. I grabbed my camera, and I wanted to find out who had the snooty ignorance to claim this. And I laughed when I saw it. Blockbuster in 2004 had 9,650 stores throughout the United States. Do you know how many they have today? 0. Gone under. Technology changes. Is that good or bad? Depends. Depends whether you run the Blockbuster company or whether you own the real estate. Because when DVDs are gone, if you think it's bad that you've got 3 premises where Blockbuster's renting from you, folks, 20 years ago, there was no Blockbuster. We had those VHS tapes. I remember reading a Time magazine article that said, VHS is coming out now and more people are buying it, and one day every home will have one. Can you believe it? It's astounding, isn't it? So, we've got that there. Here's New Zealand. Stunning scenery. This is Queenstown. I love showing that. We've done a lot in Queenstown. I want to show you one that's not commercial first, just for fun. Beautiful homes here. I can talk about all of these shots. The lake is about 60 miles, 100 kilometers long, and it's got a 3-inch tide every 15 minutes. And the scientists haven't figured out why yet. It's deeper than sea level, if you know what I mean. It's got all these geological anomalies that are just mind-blowing. So it's a fascinating place. Stunning views. And here coming up, and look how clear the water is. But anyway, this is the smallest property I've ever bought and the cheapest. It was a residential one. But there was an ad in a paper with a photo that said, help Jed shift, offers over 20,000 considered. And I should point out that here's another view. It's right by the lake, so it's in a pretty good location. And it's not a salubrious home, it's a little cabin. But I thought 20,000 is a typo. They probably meant 200,000. So when you come across an ad where you're pretty sure it's a typo, should you call or should you not call? Call, because every other person thinks it's a typo too. So I called and said, 20,000 up? She said, yep. The owner has absconded to England owing everyone money, even as accountant. They're just ditching it. And I said, well, you've asked for offers over 20,000. When you ask for offers over X, do you ever get offered X plus 5,000 or X plus 10,000? And she thought about it as if she was giving it serious consideration. And she said, you know what? Actually, no. I said, all right, I will offer you 20,000. Now, here's a little trick that I think you should use. Whenever you offer money on anything, a $20,000 property, a $20 million property, always write out a check for the deposit and staple it to the contract. Does it change the legality of anything? If they don't accept your offer, can they bank your check? No. If they do accept your offer and you didn't have a check there, would you have to write one anyway? Of course. So it doesn't change anything, but it makes it psychologically very seductive because now they know if they countersign, they bank the money. It's a done deal. Very powerful. So I wrote that in the meantime, the property had gone into a mortgagee sale. The bank called me. I think they knew who I was. They said, Dolph, surely you realize it's worth a lot more than 20,000. Why don't you come back with a reasonable offer? I mean, they were right, but I said, well, you say it's worth a lot more, but who are you? You're the bank. You fund things. You don't invest in these things. And if you can find someone who agrees with you that it's worth a lot more, sell it to them with my blessing. But in the meantime, to let you know that I'm still a serious contender of this, I'm willing to raise my offer to 22,000, you know. Do you think they accepted it? No. They wrote back and said, that's patently ridiculous. However, if you raise the offer to 22,500, it's yours. I'm flat serious. They didn't want me to give them myself the pleasure of saying I got it for what I wanted. They wanted to be able to boast, no, Bruce tried to get something right, but we made him come up to our price, you know. So I called my property manager in Queenstown. I said, listen, I just bought something sight unseen. Can you check it out? He called back 3 hours later and said, it's not bad, but the front door here is all smashed in and the shower surround, this was the days before fiberglass, it had hardwood or something. It's all rotted away. I said, acquire them, put them in. He calls me 10 minutes later. He said, I just looked in the basement. Basement's an expensive word for that thing through there. He said, I just looked in the basement. There's a brand new front door and a fiberglass shower surround. They just haven't installed them yet. Is that guy still my property manager? Could he not have gone to Home Depot or Bunnings or whatever the equivalent is and bought them and charged me for them? Would I have known any different? He said they were in the basement, in the cellar, whatever. Great guy. So we put them in. It's never been vacant for 1 day since I got it. I believe in holding for the long term. I don't actually own this one anymore because one day the council called me to do, what's it called when you have government requisition? It's called eminent domain or just government requisition? Compulsory acquisition. They said they needed the land, and under this clause and that rule and new legislation, they're going to give me fair market value. And I wrote back and said, but I don't want fair market value. They said, well, what do you mean? What do you want? I said, I don't want money for it. I want another house. They said, you're going to make us buy you another house? I said, yeah. And they did. And here's the funny thing. I've never seen the replacement. Never. It's paying rent all the time, regularly, never skipped a beat. But anyway, that just goes to show what happens. But that's residential. Then we also do commercial. I own part of this hotel there. And a whole long story behind that. But I want to show you other things. Here's one. This is a strip of 3 shops. There was a butcher operating out of this end building. Are butchers increasing in numbers or decreasing? Because we all buy our meat at where? I say we, some of us don't buy meat, but anyway. So we get them at supermarkets and all that. So I heard that it was available for sale, and I went to visit him. Now, understand, it was a completely vacant shop, apart from the operator there. And I said, I understand the building's for sale. He said, so what? I said, well, I've come to see what the numbers are. He said, can't you see I'm busy? And I said, he said, that's why I've got an agent. Go and check with the agent. And so I called the agent. I said, listen, I understand this guy's the owner, but he wouldn't talk with me. Can you give me some numbers? What do you want for it? Well, they wanted $350 or something. And I said, how much is the rent? She said, $45. I said, is that inclusive of GST or exclusive? She said, sir, there's no GST on rent. Can you believe it? I said, lady, you're right when it comes to residential, but on commercial, you have to pay rent. She said, well, I don't know, and I'm pretty busy right now. Is this good or bad? Oh, no, it's hot. It's exciting. I had trouble containing my enthusiasm because I thought anyone else going to inquire, he'd come across this moronic seller and the semi-moronic agent. I mean, no, it's great. So I made an offer low enough that they'd have to counter like $290 or something at $45,000. Do you know what the return is on that? It's huge, right? Yeah, 15%. And but I thought I'll delay it, so I delayed it till after Christmas. And then I put my offer in, and they accepted without countering. It's hot. It's good. So everything has an angle. No deal is ever the same. It's another view of it. Of course, it's since succumbed to the earthquake. Here's an interesting one. This here is a funeral parlor. Some of you probably know what it means academically, but you don't know what it means. They process bodies there, human bodies, cadavers. So the garage, I guess, has to be extra long so that the hearse can drive in and they can pull the coffin out. And if it's raining, the long hearse and the long coffin is still under cover. And then they have a viewing room and a slumber room and a chilling room. Do I need to explain what they chill there? No. It had been vacant for 3 years. Is this good or bad? Good. It depends. If you're the owner of the building, it's not very good. So vacant for 3 years. The owner couldn't get a tenant. The agents couldn't get a tenant. And it had this horrible aura about it. I mean, what else do you do with a vacant funeral parlor? I understand there's one in Sydney that was converted into a restaurant, which I find quite obnoxious. Yes, you know, it's true. I hope it's vegetarian, but anyway. So do you think I swooped in and bought this property? Yes. No. What would I do with a vacant funeral parlor that no one else has managed to find a tenant for? No. What I did is I employed a charming young lady at the princely sum of $8 an hour, that was the going rate, to call every funeral director starting in this town and going out in concentric circles further and further. It took her 2 days, and we got to the 80-kilometer mark before she found one who didn't say, "Don't bother me," or "No, of course I'm not interested." But he said, "Yes, I've always wanted to operate out of there. Tell me more." And at that stage, she put me on the line. So 2 days, $8 an hour, 16 hours, 96 or whatever, a bit more, $128. It's nothing. So I spoke with this funeral director, and I said, "I understand you'd like to operate in this town." He said, "Oh, yes, too right." I said, "Well, there's a building for sale, a vacant funeral building. Why don't you go and check it out?" Why would I offer it to him if I want to be the investor? Because the last thing I want is a tenant who, when he finds out I bought it 5 minutes prior to signing him up, begrudges the fact that I'm his landlord forever. All right? So he said, "No, I don't want to buy buildings. I know how to run funerals. I want someone to buy the building." I said, "Well, we might be able to talk. Why don't you check it out and see if you like it?" He checked it out. He loved it. I said, "Well, here's how this could work. If you're willing to sign a heads of agreement where, subject to me buying the property, you commit to becoming the tenant, then I'm willing to have a crack at buying it." And he said, "Well, what's the rental?" And I said, "Well, I figured this portion at $8 a foot and that portion at $16 a foot. It was pre-metric days." And he said, "Not so fast, Sonny Jim, not so fast. I'll only do it if you give me a long-term lease." Remember one of those advantages? They like long leases. Now, one of my golden rules in here, I know I'm jumping around a bit, you're still following me, right? I've got 8 golden rules in here. One of them is never be the first to name a figure. That person usually loses. So I would have been thrilled with a 5-year lease. A lot of commercial leases on retail space and that are 2 years, 3 years. So I was about to say 5 years, but I said, "How much would you like?" He said, "I'll only do it if you give me 20 years. I said, "We can talk." So I had him signed up essentially at $30,000 a year. It's a bit more complex. There's another portion of the building, and the seller wanted to occupy that to run his engraving business, but it worked out at $30,000 a year. So it was worth $30,000 a year to me to buy it. The value of a building is the rent divided by the cap rate. Right? If cap rate is 10%, then it's worth $300,000 to me. Well, I negotiated with the seller because it was vacant. He just wanted to get rid of it. I got it for $170,000. All right, that's a good deal. But it's double story, obviously. It's triple brick. It's a great building. So then I went to the bank, and I said, "Mr. Bank Manager, I know that traditionally you accept the lesser of the actual purchase price or the registered valuation to determine what it's worth. And I fully admit I'm only paying $170,000 for this. But when I signed the contract, I didn't have a tenant. And now I have a tenant at $30,000 a year. Surely, Mr. Bank Manager, you'll agree it's worth a lot more than the current market cap rate into the rent of $30,000. And he said, "Well, we're not so sure." I said, "That's right, because you use the most conservative valuers around. In fact, standard valuers are so optimistic in your eyes that you engage your own valuers who are schooled into even being more pessimistic." Is that kind of what happens? Doesn't matter. So they sent their conservative, old-fashioned, low-balling valuer in, and they came up with a value of $240,000. Is that good or bad? Well, it doesn't matter. They were willing to give me a 60-some% loan. It worked out at $160,000 that they'd lend me, and it was costing me $170,000. All right? So we went ahead. I got it. I paid $170,000, I got a $160,000 loan. It was when those rates were really high. I remember paying 16% interest on that loan. Was I upset by that? No, I was earning way more than that, and I knew that in all probability, interest rates wouldn't go up the way they did in Israel or Argentina, but they'd come down. They did within a year. They were 10%. A year later, they were 12. A year later, they were 10, and then on it went, and my cash flow went through the roof. And I went back to the bank a year later and got them to do another valuation, and they said, "Well, now it's worth about $300,000. And just interesting how it's the same building, same rent, same lease, everything, but their estimate has gone. So I have a question for you, and we won't do the numbers because I want to keep it simple. But I paid $170,000. My rental was $30,000. How much of that $30,000 did I have to carve off for property taxes, insurance, maintenance? Zero. So all my questions are easy. Nothing. The tenant pays all of that. All right, so I'm getting 30,000 divided by a purchase price of 170. What's the return? Anyone? About 17%? All right, that's one way of looking at it. Here's another way of looking at it. I collected 30,000 a year in rent. I don't have to pay rates, insurance, and maintenance. I do have to pay the mortgage out of that. My mortgage was about 15,000 a year. So 15,000 from the 30 leaves about 15. How much cash did I have in the building? 10. 170 purchase price minus the 160 mortgage. So if you look at that, I had a 10,000 a year quadruple net return. Sorry, 15 return, seeing if you're awake, on a $10,000 cash investment. That's 150% a year. So I was earning every year net from that property 1.5 times what I paid in cash to acquire it. Plus I got the capital growth. So the question I want you to pose to yourselves when you're looking at a deal is, in this case, would your return be about 17% or would it be 150%? Both are valid depending on how you define return, but in my mind, I'm after that 150%. I love it. Now, some of you don't like commercial because it's way too big for your liking. So, that's the engraver shop that came with it. Plus there were 5 oversized garages. It was all pretty cool.